They saw a tax attorney. They saw someone who spent her days buried in paperwork, chasing deadlines, arguing with the IRS on behalf of strangers. They thought that was all I was. They were wrong. And it took my cousin's rehearsal dinner to prove it. I want to be honest about something before I tell you this story. I am not someone who enjoys confrontation. I never have been. Growing up in Baton Rouge, I was the quiet one. The one who got straight A's and said yes ma'am and never made waves at the dinner table. My aunt used to call me the serious one, and the way she said it, it was never a compliment. Serious meant dull. Serious meant I had forgotten how to have fun. Serious meant I wasn't like the rest of them, and in my family, being different was something you either apologized for or hid. I hid it for a long time. My name is Adrienne. I'm 31 years old, and for the past 4 years, I have worked as a senior counsel at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. Before that, I clerked for a federal judge for 2 years. Before that, I graduated top of my class from Georgetown Law. I do not say these things to impress you. I say them because my family, most of my family, had no idea any of it was true. Not really. They knew I worked in law, the way you know your neighbor works, in finance. You know it, but it means nothing to you. It's just a word you say when someone asks. My aunt is a woman named Roberta. She raised 3 kids in Shreveport and drives a Cadillac and has opinions about everything. Your weight, your hair, who you voted for, whether your casserole has enough salt. She is the kind of woman who commands a room without trying and has never once in her life second-guessed herself. I both admired and feared her for as long as I can remember. Her daughter, my cousin Felicia, was getting married in October. Felicia is 2 years older than me and beautiful in the way that makes strangers stop and turn around on the street. She married a man named Grant, a commercial real estate developer from Dallas who wore his success like a second skin. Nice man, handsome. The kind of person who fills a room with energy and always knows the right joke to tell at the right moment. I almost didn't go to the rehearsal dinner. I had a case. I always have a case. The DOJ does not pause because someone's cousin is getting married in Louisiana, and I was in the middle of something I can't fully discuss here. I'll say only that it involved a corporation and a federal investigation and a number of very uncomfortable people in very expensive suits. I had been working 14-hour days for 6 weeks. I was tired down to my bones. But my mother called 3 times, and on the 3rd call, she didn't leave a message. She just let it ring until I picked up. Adrienne, she said, you are coming to this dinner. Felicia has been asking about you. Your aunt has been asking about you. You are going to get on a plane and you are going to smile and you are going to be part of this family for 48 hours. Can you do that? I could do that. I booked a flight to Shreveport for Thursday afternoon, planning to fly back early Saturday morning. I packed 1 dress for the rehearsal dinner, 1 for the wedding, and my laptop because I was never not working. I did not tell anyone I was coming until I was already at the airport, which was a habit I developed over years of plans that fell through at the last minute. The rehearsal dinner was held at an old plantation-style venue just outside the city, the kind of place with Spanish moss hanging from live oaks and white string lights wound around every post and column. It was beautiful. I'll give them that. Felicia had taste, and Grant's family clearly had money, and together they had produced something that looked like the cover of a Southern Living magazine. I arrived late. Later than I'd intended. My connecting flight through Atlanta had been delayed 40 minutes, and by the time I got to the venue and found parking and walked through those heavy wooden doors, dinner had already started. Heads turned when I walked in. Some faces lit up. A few did not. My Aunt Roberta's did not. She looked at me from across the room the way you look at someone who has just tracked mud across a clean floor. Not angry exactly, measured, evaluating. She excused herself from the conversation she was having and walked toward me with that particular walk she has, shoulders back, chin up. The walk of a woman who has never once entered a room she didn't intend to own. You made it, she said. Not warmly. I made it, I said. Flight was delayed. I'm sorry I'm late. She looked me over. My dress, my hair, the small, rolling carry-on I'd left by the door. You came straight from the airport, she said. I did. You look tired. I almost laughed. I am tired. She made a small sound, not quite a sigh, not quite a dismissal, and steered me toward the table. I found my seat between a second cousin I barely knew and an empty chair that belonged, apparently, to one of Grant's groomsmen who was still at the bar. I unfolded my napkin and told myself, 48 hours. You can do anything for 48 hours. The dinner moved the way these things do. Toasts, laughter, the kind of warmth that comes from people who are genuinely happy and want everyone else to feel it too. Felicia glowed. Grant's mother cried twice. There were speeches and clinking glasses and a slideshow of photos from Felicia and Grant's first year together. And then, somewhere between the entree and the dessert course, it started. I don't know how the conversation turned to careers. It usually does in rooms like that. Someone mentions what they do, and then someone else mentions what they do, and suddenly everyone is at the table of life comparing hands. It's human nature. I've made my peace with it. Grant's brother, a man named Patrick, who worked in pharmaceutical sales, was talking about a deal he'd closed recently. He was loud about it, the way people are when they're proud and a little drunk. Numbers were mentioned. Percentages. Grant laughed and clapped him on the back. And then my aunt turned to me. "And what is it you're doing these days, Adrienne?" she asked, in the tone of someone performing politeness rather than feeling it. "Still in law?" I said simply. Right, she said. "Contract work, isn't it? Or is it taxes?" "Contract work, isn't it? Or is it taxes?" "Tax law? Technically?" I said. "Though what I do now is a bit broader than that." She nodded the way people nod when they've already decided they're not interested in what you're about to say. So paperwork, essentially. And there it was. Not mean, exactly. Just reductive. Just small. The way she always made things small when they didn't fit neatly into the version of the world she'd already decided on. "You always were the studious type," she continued, reaching for her wine glass. "Very diligent. Very responsible." She said those words the way someone else might say forgettable. "We used to worry about you, you know, whether you'd loosen up enough to actually live your life." Felicia, bless her, looked slightly uncomfortable. But she didn't say anything. She never did when her mother was like this. None of us ever did. "Adrienne drives all the way to D.C. to push paper," my aunt said to the table, not loudly, but loud enough, with a small indulgent smile, like she was sharing something charming. Nothing wrong with it, of course. Someone has to do it. A few people laughed politely. Patrick's wife smiled without showing her teeth. The second cousin next to me suddenly found something very interesting about her bread roll. I said nothing. I cut a piece of my chicken and chewed it slowly and reminded myself that I was here for Felicia, not for this. What I didn't know, what none of us at that table knew, was that Grant's best man had just walked back from the bar and was standing 2 feet behind my aunt's left shoulder. His name was James Whitfield. He was 34 years old, had grown up in Austin, and had spent 6 years as a federal prosecutor before moving into private practice. He and I had been in the same courtroom once, 2 years ago, on opposite sides of a case that neither of us was supposed to discuss outside of official channels. We had spoken briefly in a courthouse hallway in Alexandria, Virginia, and I had liked him immediately. He was sharp and direct and didn't waste words, which I consider among the highest of compliments. I did not recognize him at first. He had a beard now that he hadn't had before, and he was in civilian clothes, and my mind was elsewhere. But he recognized me. He set his drink down on the edge of the table. He looked at my aunt. He looked at and then he said, in the particular calm of someone who has spent years addressing courtrooms full of hostile people, "I'm sorry, I don't think I caught that. Did you just say Adrienne pushes paper?" My aunt turned around, surprised by the interruption. "I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I understood correctly," James said. He wasn't aggressive about it. He was pleasant, even. Smiling, almost. The kind of smile you'd see on someone who was about to say something very precise. Because the last time I was in a courtroom with this woman, she was representing the federal government in a case that had been building for 3 years. She had more case files than I'd ever seen assembled in one place. She spoke for 40 minutes without notes, and she walked out of that room with exactly what she came for. He paused. "I've been in federal litigation for 6 years. I've never seen anyone work a case the way she did that day. So I want to make sure I heard you correctly because I think maybe something got lost in translation." The table had gone quiet. My aunt opened her mouth and then closed it again. Felicia was staring at me. Grant was staring at James. Patrick had put down his fork. I felt warmth climb up my neck and into my face, and for a moment I didn't know what to do with my hands. James looked at me and gave a small nod, the kind of nod that means you don't have to explain anything, and I didn't. And then he pulled out the empty chair beside me and sat down and picked up his menu like nothing had happened. "What did you order?" he asked me. The chicken looked good, but I was eyeing the shrimp. "The chicken," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. "Good call." My aunt said nothing for the rest of the dinner. Not about me, not about careers, not about anything particularly. She made small talk with the woman on her other side and smiled when she was supposed to smile and laughed when she was supposed to laugh. But something had shifted in the room. You could feel it, the way you can feel a change in pressure before a storm. Later, when dessert was being cleared and people were drifting toward the reception area, Felicia found me near the doorway to the garden. She hugged me, long and tight the way she used to when we were kids. "I didn't know," she said into my shoulder. "I know," I said. "I mean, I knew you were doing well, but I didn't understand what that meant." "It's fine," I said, and I meant it. "You've been busy. You have a wedding to worry about." She pulled back and looked at me. Her mascara had tracked a little at the corner of one eye. "She's not going to say she's sorry." "I know. She doesn't know how." "I know that too." Felicia shook her head. "I'm proud of you. For real. I always have been, even when I didn't know the whole picture." I squeezed her hand. We went back inside. I want to tell you that after that dinner, I felt something clean and definitive, that some old wound had finally closed. But the truth is more complicated and less satisfying than that. Driving back to the hotel that night, I thought about all the years I'd let my family's version of me go uncorrected, not out of modesty, not because I didn't know my own worth, but because I had convinced myself that correcting them required too much energy, too much proof, too much of myself offered up to people who had already decided what they were going to see. I had been wrong about that. I saw it clearly for the first time. You can be competent and still let people talk over you. You can be accomplished and still let someone describe you with a word like diligent in a tone that makes it sound like a consolation prize. You can know exactly who you are and still hand other people the pen and let them write your story for you because it's easier than fighting for the narrative every single time. That night, I called my mother from the hotel room. She was already in bed. It was late, but she picked up anyway. "How was it?" she asked. "Interesting," I said. "Did Roberta say something?" A pause. "She said something." My mother sighed. The sigh of someone who has been navigating this woman for 30 years and is tired of it in a deep, cellular way. "What happened?" I told her. "All of it." When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I should have said something a long time ago. I should have made her understand." "You couldn't have made her understand," I said. "Some people have to see it." Did she see it? I thought about my aunt's face in the moment after James spoke. The way her expression had traveled from dismissal to surprise to something I couldn't fully name, something between embarrassment and recalibration, like a GPS rerouting. "I think so," I said. "I don't know if it'll stick." My mother laughed softly. "With Roberta, nothing sticks unless she decides it should." "Then she'll decide or she won't," I said. "Either way, I'm going to stop waiting for her to give me permission to take up space." The wedding the next day was beautiful. Felicia was radiant in a way that felt almost unfair to everyone else in the room. Grant cried at the altar, a good, quiet, private cry that he wiped away with the back of his hand and which made me like him considerably more than I had before. My aunt sat 2 rows in front of me, and when the ceremony ended, she turned and looked at me for just a moment across the heads of the people around her. She didn't smile, but she held my gaze. Directly, without the flicker of condescension I was used to. Like she was seeing something that required a second look. I held her gaze back. And then I turned to watch my cousin walk back up the aisle on the arm of her husband, her face full of something I hoped would last her a lifetime. James found me at the reception afterward. He was easy company, funny, unpretentious, better at listening than talking, which is a quality I find rare and worth remarking on. "You should have said something yourself," he told me, not unkindly. "Last night." "I know. You're better at it than you think you are." "I know that too," I said. I just needed to remember it. He raised his glass. To remembering. I raised mine back. On the plane home Sunday morning, somewhere over Tennessee, I opened my laptop. I had 4 emails that needed responses and a brief due Wednesday and a meeting scheduled Monday afternoon that I was not remotely prepared for. I worked until we started our descent into Reagan National, and when the wheels touched down, I felt the particular settling of returning. The city pulling me back into its current, into the case files and the courtrooms and the particular weight of the work I had chosen. I am not a woman who pushes paper. I am a woman who builds cases that take 3 years and 40 witnesses and 17 depositions to assemble. I am a woman who stands in front of federal judges and argues the positions of the United States government with everything I have. I am a woman who chose this work because it matters and who does it every day, whether or not the people at my family's dinner table understand what it means. My aunt called me 3 weeks later. She called on a Tuesday, which surprised me. She usually called on Sundays if she called at all. She didn't apologize. I told you she wouldn't, and she didn't. But she said this: your cousin told me more about what you do, the actual work of it. I didn't know. Now you do, I said. A long pause. Roberta is not comfortable with silence the way I am. I let it sit. You could have explained, she said finally. You could have asked, I said. Another pause. Then, fair point. That was it. That was as close as it was going to get, and I have made my peace with that. Because I have learned, slowly, the way you learn things that cost you something to learn, that I do not need the people who underestimated me to fully reckon with what they got wrong. I do not need an apology to know my own value. I do not need someone else's recognition to make the work real. What I needed, what that dinner gave me, strangely, in the worst possible way, was the reminder that I had been asking permission for too long. Permission to be taken seriously. Permission to be proud. Permission to exist in my own family as the person I actually was, rather than the quiet, diligent, paper-pushing version they had decided on 20 years ago. I don't ask for permission anymore. I walked into a deposition last month, a long one, against a team of attorneys from a firm that charges more per hour than I make in a week. And I sat down and I opened my binder and I thought, they see a government attorney. They see someone on a salary with a pension and no equity stake and no incentive to fight hard. They were wrong, and it took about 40 minutes to prove it. I've thought about that dinner a lot since it happened. Not obsessively, I'm too busy for that, but in the quiet moments. On the metro. Waiting for a case file to load. Standing in the kitchen at 6 a.m. with my coffee before the day takes over. What I keep coming back to isn't what James said, even though what he said mattered. What I keep coming back to is how long I had let it go. Years of dinners. Years of Roberta's particular brand of dismissal, dressed up as concern, wrapped in the language of family love. Years of sitting quietly and cutting my chicken and telling myself it wasn't worth the energy. The thing about silence is that it gets misread. I thought I was being mature. I thought I was choosing peace. But from where my aunt was sitting, my silence looked like agreement. Every time I didn't correct her, I was handing her a little more authority over the story she was telling about me, and she told it confidently, the way people do when no one has ever pushed back. That's not anyone's fault but mine. I don't say that to be hard on myself. I say it because I think it's true, and I've spent enough time in courtrooms to know that the truth doesn't get easier by being avoided. The cause and the effect are connected always. I stayed quiet, and so the version of me that lived in my family's imagination stayed small. Those two things were not separate. They were the same thing. What changed that night wasn't that James defended me, though I'm grateful he did, and I told him so afterward. What changed was that I saw, clearly and without any way to look away from it, what years of unnecessary smallness had cost me. Not in my career, not in my work, but in the one room where, if I'm honest, I still wanted to be seen. Intelligence without the courage to use it is just a private comfort. You can be the smartest person in the room and still let someone rewrite you into someone lesser if you decide that keeping the peace matters more than telling the truth. I'd been telling myself I was the smart one for not engaging. What I was actually doing was protecting myself from a discomfort I didn't want to feel. That's not wisdom. That's avoidance with better vocabulary. The resilience part, the part I'm still working on, is learning that I don't need a James in every room. I needed him that night, and I'll be honest about that. But what I'm building now, slowly, is the ability to be my own witness, to say clearly and without apology, this is who I am, this is what I do, and it matters, and you don't have to understand it for that to be true. Roberto will probably never fully understand what I do or why it matters. That's okay. What I decided, somewhere over Tennessee on the flight home, is that her understanding is no longer the thing I'm working toward. I'm working toward something else. The kind of quiet, unshakable certainty that doesn't need a dinner table audience to confirm it. I have it most days, and on the days I don't, I remember that room. I remember the silence after James spoke. And I remember that the truth, when it finally enters a room, doesn't ask permission. Neither do I. Not anymore.